Welcome back to my garage. This is the second video I'm doing now showing my garage build. In the first one, I just set up the main carcass of the cabinets that you see behind me from my miter station. In this video, I'm gonna set up my router table that's gonna be built into the miter station. I'm gonna set up the drawers for all of the different bays that you can see behind me already built. And then I'm gonna set up the fence for the miter saw. In this video, we're going to pick up where we left off from the last video, and that is continuing to assemble our miter saw station. In the last video, we put together these cabinet boxes and we started to run our dust collection. If you haven't seen that video and you want to see how we got to where we are now, it's on my channel. It's the only other video I got, so it shouldn't be too hard to find it. We're going to start off by making a hole in the countertops here to put our router insert. You can see that I'm using a shaper origin. You definitely don't need something like this to do that, but I have one, so I figured why not use it. It does make life easier sometimes. I considered buying a standalone router table or buying the accessory to the saw stop. However, if you've got a smaller shop space, it helps to integrate your router table into other things. In my case, I'm integrating it into the miter station, so it'll be dual purpose, and therefore I'm just not taking up as much room. Here's the router insert that I'm going to be putting into the table. If you haven't seen the Shaper Origin in action before, it's a handheld CNC. It's really cool. You don't need it, but it is really helpful to have sometimes. And in this case, it's just going to make sure that I cut a perfectly sized hole for the router insert to go into. Here's the screen where I can put in the dimensions of what I want to cut. So I'm just putting in a hole slightly smaller than the base of the insert itself, because I'm not actually recessing the insert yet. I am just making a hole for the mechanism to go into. That makes sense when you see the hole, I think. And there goes Kona the shop cat down into the cabinets. She's going to be sad when I block that off with the hose soon. What I'm showing here is the radius that's on the corners of this insert. And as I zoom in here on this screen, you can see that I actually have the ability to set the radius on the corners too. So I could have them be, perfectly sharp 90 degrees, or I could have them at whatever radius I decide. Now when I start cutting, it's kind of hard to see, but on the screen I start to trace along a line. I've got a better shot of that later in the video, but I cut my hole out and the mechanism is going to fit nice and easy down that hole in the center there. Now before I can continue working on this router insert, I need to clear out the cubby that it's sitting above. Here's another look at Kona. She loves being out in the garage. She loves to roll in sawdust. That part's not great. Whenever I'm running power tools though, we send her on inside. What I'm putting together now is the router box. So this is going to surround the actual router itself down beneath the table, and it's going to have its own dust extraction. So I shouldn't have to deal with much dust at all between this box, and you can see another hose coming off the main one there. That's going to run up to the fence. So I'll have dust extraction underneath the table as well as at the fence. Here I am trying to get it mounted. You'll see I used my head to hold the box up here. At this point, I was just marking for the screw locations. The mounting hardware for this is slotted, so you can put your screws in ahead of time, and then you fit the box over the screws, slide it forward, and it clicks into place. Really like it when they add stuff like that. It just makes life easier. A lot of the Rockler stuff that I bought has been really easy to use and also just works great. So shout out to them. Not sponsored by them. You can probably look at the views of this video and see that I'm not sponsored by anyone yet, but maybe someday. Now we've got Kona coming back over to check out what I'm doing. You might have seen her poke her head down at the middle there. Yeah, drill out, add the screws, slide the box on. It's easy peasy. With the box installed, I can now run the hose down to it, and you can even see I've got a gate there, so I can control when the suction is going to my router table and when it's not. Now I've set up most of my dust collection on this wall, but I still need to be able to run dust collection to my other tools, which are going to be pretty much anywhere else in the garage that I want to put them, since they're all on mobile bases. So that's what this hose is for. You can see it goes into the workbench, and I've got a gate there so I can turn it on and off. And it's coming out at the bottom here in this hose. Rockler makes these neat quick disconnects, so you can you hook up another adapter to the machine that you want, and then this just plugs right in, makes for really fast changing of dust collection if you're not going to have an individual hose run to each machine. I'm also using Rockler's expanding hose. This thing expands out to 28 feet, so it should reach every part of the garage that I need. The problem right now is that this is just running around loose underneath this cabinet. So I'm just gonna cut out a hole that's the same inner diameter of this coupler, and then I'm gonna mount it right here to the side. So that way when I'm done, I can come over and I can just plug it in and it will stay exactly where I left it. So to make the mount for the hose, all I'm gonna do is cut some circles out of plywood and then stack them together, essentially making a large cylinder that I can slide the fitting over. I am using my shaper origin once again. This time I programmed in a circle that's the size of the inside there. I did err on the side of making it too big rather than too small. It's always easy to remove material, not so easy to put material back. One thing that is nice about the shaper here is that if the size is off, there's a really easy offset feature I can hit, where I can offset the cut either in or out to fine-tune the fit of something. Makes it really easy to sneak up on the size you need for a cut. With this build, I've really been trying to focus on organization. I've always in the past struggled with organization. I've been more of a sort of organized chaos type of person, but I'd like to get the shop organized to where everything has a home. The next hurdle will be actually putting things back in their home, just because I give them a place to be stored. It doesn't mean I'm actually going to put things away at the end of the day, so that's something I'm going to be working on. Now the next step is to make a face frame for all of this. So I've got my poplar sitting over here that's going to be used for the face frame, as well as the drawer fronts and drawer faces. The problem is it's really long, so what I need to do first is run it through the joiner and then run it through the planer. But before I do that, I'm going to cut it down to roughly the lengths that needs to be. Because otherwise these are just really long boards to try to run through a joiner, and it's just going to be a lot easier. Even though I have a pretty long joiner, it'll be a lot easier if I just get these down to the lengths they need to be. So I'm going to go ahead and take those measurements, figure out what lengths I need, and then start dimensioning everything up. I mentioned in my last video that it would be important that the miter saw was sitting slightly above the work surface, and here you can see I raised it up with shims. I made it short on purpose just so I could fine tune that fit and get the miter saw to sit perfectly flush, or actually a little proud of the workshop. Now here's the other shop cat, Paisley. She's a little more shy, but she'll say hi. What can I do for you? After fine tuning that height of the miter saw, I'm going to start cutting everything down to size here. Just makes it easier in a smaller shop if your boards are smaller, because it's easy to smack stuff into things. And you can see I'm limited on the outfeed of the joiner here. I've still got plenty of room, and I actually luckily have the height to where it goes into the cabinet rather than hitting the cabinet. But if I ever needed more room, I could just turn the whole thing, open the garage, and essentially just start running my material out through the garage door. Now you might have noticed in that last shot that I was a little sweaty. It is the middle of summer in Missouri when I was doing this. It was very hot. I ended up giving in and buying a Mr. Cool. Seems like everyone was doing paid promotions for them, and I was trying to avoid buying one. But after looking at reviews and also just how easy it was to install, I ended up getting one. Now, one downside I've noticed to recording all of my projects, especially when I'm working with my fiance here, is that there's documented proof now when I'm wrong and she's right. So that's fun. All right, over there, please. No, I asked. I asked you. This whole time. I asked if you walked away with it. You said yes. You admitted to it. All right. You gotta hold this one. Yeah, I blamed her for losing the pencil, and it turns out that it was in my pocket the whole time. So now when I'm wrong, I can't even try to deny it or argue. It's recorded, so we can just look at the tape and see that I'm wrong. We put our face frame together using pocket screws. You probably saw some of those there. It's just an easy way to attach it all together. We started by putting each piece individually on the frame, held on with these bandy clamps here. And then once we had the fit perfect, we removed all of the pieces and screwed them together with pocket holes. While we do record some of our arguments, we do also get to record when we have fun. It's not a contest. Hands up. That was the left face frame. Here you can take a look at the right face frame. You can see that we did glue and screw the whole thing together. Then we glue it on, hold it with bandy clamps, and I add a few pin nails just as insurance. This piece of the face frame needed to be cut flush just like the other side. Japanese pole saw here made it really easy to get a nice flush cut out of it. And here's where we are right now. Starting to look a little more like a shop, especially compared to the first video, if you saw that, when I just had this thing full of boxes and random crap. Now it's time to make the drawers. So we're going to have drawers in all of these bays. So I need to clear out one of them, take the measurements, and then I made myself a cut list. I do like to do a lot of my SketchUp on the computer, but sometimes it's just easier for me to do it on paper. That's how I originally learned, and so that's kind of what I stick to sometimes. So we started by putting the drawer slides at the bottom, and we measured the distance between the slides. So we know how large of a box we need to make to have it fit between those slides. Ashley and I got a little bit of an assembly line going here. We started by cutting to width all of our plywood using the track saw like you saw there. Then it was my job to start running the groove through all of these boards so that we could put a 1/4 inch plywood bottom into them. And while I was doing that, Ashley was over on the miter saw chopping all the pieces down to the size that they needed to be. Here I am testing the fit of that groove that I ran. Saw blade is 1/8 of an inch thick, so 2 grooves side by side makes 1/4, and my plywood is 1/4 inch thick. I like doing it with 2 passes like that rather than like a dado stack or a router bit, because then you can fine tune the size of that groove, and then you know that you're going to get a nice tight fit with the plywood. You don't have to worry about making it too tight because plywood is very stable, so it is not going to expand or contract very much, so you can go ahead and make that as tight as you want it to be. You'll also notice that we assembled these boxes with pocket holes once again. They are a great tool for making cabinets and for making drawers and all things like that. People hate on them a little bit, but I think in this application, they are great. All that's left to do then is to slide this into the tracks that we already installed and see how it fits. This took a little bit of trial and error to get right, and you're going to hear here the excitement from Ashley when we finally got the measurements right and the cuts right and our drawer fit into the slides.
This is nice!
29 to go.
29 drawers?
28 to go. There's 29 drawers. 28 drawers to go.
What the f***? It took us 2 days to do this!
All right, so we finished up building the different drawer sections that we were going to do. And if you remember from the SketchUp that I showed, the plans that we had originally, we were going to do the same with this center section under the miter saw. But what we realized is that we have plenty of drawers as it is, but what we don't have is good storage for our Festool containers. They were over on the side, blocked by my dust collection. They were going to be a pain to get to whenever I needed them. So we talked about it and we decided what we're going to do is actually split this section in half. And have large drawers on the bottom that the Festool containers can sit in. And then at the top, either 1 or 2 drawers, I'm not sure how many yet, we'll decide at the top, just to have different bits and accessories that go with the miter station or like measuring tools, stuff like that. So we're gonna get started. First thing we're gonna do is add a divider right through the middle of this bay to add drawers to. Now you might find this surprising, but we're back to pocket holes again. So I measured how high I want the divider to sit, and then put the center divider right in the middle of the bay. You can see here what I'm going to do is put some plywood scraps that I cut to be spacers. That way when I slide this in, I can set the plywood down on those spacers so I know that I've got them at the exact height that I want. And then all I have to focus on is getting that middle divider screwed in so it is square and sitting in the right spot. Then I move the spacers over to the other side and do the same thing. And yep, we held the whole thing together with pocket holes. After that, we made the face frame for this section, glue that one on, add some pin nails, and then, not going to bore you with more drawer construction, but we made more drawers. We have finally finished making drawer boxes, and I think this is starting to look like a real shop. Pretty excited with how it's turning out. What we need to do now is lay laminate down on top of the surface. Laminate is going to be great because one, it's just gonna look better than the plywood top, but two, glue doesn't stick to it. So it's gonna be great just as like an easy cleanup, no mess kind of work surface. So that's what I'm gonna do next. Before I can do that though, I need to take everything off of the surface over here. So that means I gotta pull the miter saw, I gotta pull the dust collection hoses, all that stuff, and then lay the laminate on top. After I've done that, I've got a couple new holes that I need to cut. I need to cut slots for my T-track system to lay those in. I wanna do that after the laminate is on though, because the laminate, even though it's really thin, it still has, you know, a thickness to it. So if I put the tracks in before putting the laminate on, it's possible I'd get the depth wrong and the T-track would sit too high. So laminate goes on first, then I cut my grooves, lay the T-track, and then all that'll be left is to make drawer faces. So I'm excited to get this thing wrapped up. Before I can put the laminate down, it's time to do what you hear every woodworker complain about, and that's sand. Got to get the surface prepped and clean so I can put the laminate down and one, have it stick, and two, have it not have any weird bumps or ridges or grooves or anything. I got this laminate from Home Depot. It's relatively cheap. Here I'm just testing the fit to make sure that I have enough material to fit on the countertop. I measured ahead of time, but you know, the old adage, measure twice, cut once. So definitely want to double check that before you start putting glue on stuff. If you haven't used contact cement before, you put a coat on both surfaces and then you allow them to dry. With the product that I got, it was about 10 to 15 minutes before it was dry to the touch, or just a little tacky. I put those spacers down so that I can get my laminate exactly where it needs to be, and then I can pull out one spacer at a time and start to push down and adhere the laminate to the top. If you don't put spacers down like that, as soon as these two surfaces touch each other, they grab a hold really strong. So you're definitely going to want a way to have your laminate positioned before you let those two surfaces touch each other. After that, it was a bunch of rolling this roller around to get the laminate adhered properly to the work surface. No audio here because you don't need to hear me grunting and breathing heavy while I'm doing this. Then it's on to the other side. Another thing to be aware of is this stuff is pretty noxious, so even though it was super hot outside and humid, we opened the garage doors up, put a fan so that we could have the fumes running out of the house, and then started laying our coats down. Now this part is extremely satisfying to do. I just grabbed a flush trim bit with a bearing on it and started running the router all along the edges. So it's going to trim that laminate back exactly flush with the surface. And I actually came back and did it again with a bit of a chamfer bit so that I'd have a little bit of relief on the edge there. Just kind of protects the laminate, so the laminate is set back a little bit and it's not going to get caught by anything that might grab it there. You remember I cut this hole out for the router base before, so now it's time to remove the laminate from that hole and cut the second hole. So the second hole here is only going to be cut to partial thickness, and that's going to allow the router insert plate itself to sit down and be perfectly flush with the work surface. So I'm taking my measurements here, throwing them into the shaper origin, and then I can go ahead and start removing material. I sped everything up here, but I did have to do a few passes each time, just going a little bit further until I was able to fine tune that depth to where my router plate sits nice and flush. So here I am just showing with the board, you know, that it runs over there nice and easy. If it were to snag when it hit the sides ever, it could be pretty dangerous, causing you to, you know, feed it into the blade too quickly, or just have the piece, you know, teeter back and forth while it's in contact with the blade. Neither one would be good. Next, we made a template for where the miter saw is sitting because we hadn't added laminate to that section yet. So we made our template, taped it down to the laminate, and then using the track saw, I was able to get the cuts almost perfect. Did have to come back with my hand saw a little bit, and finish some of those cuts, but track saw made easy work of it. Then pull out the router once again, and you can see here I just did the chamfer right off the bat. Here I'm using painter's tape so I can get my miter saw set up parallel to the front of the workbench. Someone put some tape on my back here. I don't know who that possibly could have been. But if I didn't have it square or parallel, then the fence wouldn't be parallel either, and it would just look kind of silly. We put down a piece of tape, and then we set a straight line all the way across. So I don't want my fence to be exactly perfect with my miter saw fence. So the plan is to set it back maybe like 1/16 or 1/8 of an inch off. If you kind of look behind the fence, I'm gonna need to run tracks back there. And if you look down where I'm pointing right here, this is where the T-tracks are going to run. So I'll run a track back and across, and that will allow me to move this fence whenever I want to. The reason I'd want to move it is so I have a larger work area if I ever want more space to use this as sort of like a workbench. But then you can see I also drew lines coming all the way forward. So the reason for that is so whenever I want, I can pull out the router station fence and I can slide it into both rails and then slide it into place like that. And then I can use it for the router table. I ended up changing my mind about the T-track running the length of the workbench. All I need are T-tracks that are running from front to back. So I ended up chopping the fence, the blue fence, down a little bit so that it would have the same spacing as the router table fence. That way they can share this insert. You'll see here that my thumb is all bandaged up. This is just me being dumb. I didn't even hurt it actually cutting anything or using a tool. I cut it trying to remove a new router blade out of its packaging. I don't know why, but sometimes the shanks are just so tight in there. And like an idiot, I grabbed a hold of the router blade and I tried to pull it out of the packaging, and all I did was cut my thumb wide open. The router bit left a rounded over groove at the end, so I just needed to take a chisel and square that up. And you can see there I got a decent fit with my T-tracks. Now I'm just testing out the fit. My miter saw fence slides in nice and easy. And lock it down. And then eventually I'll show you guys I have dust collection that's going to run to that. Now I'm adding the last T-track that I need for the blue extruded aluminum miter saw track. I was able to find an adapter on Amazon that looks like the seller just 3D prints, but it lets you put a palm router into your track saw track, which is really nice. It made cutting these grooves really easy. I did it in multiple passes, so it was important that I was able to run it down the same path every time. And using that adapter with the track saw track made it super easy. Now we're over to the right side. Here I'm just kind of showing how the whole system works. So I can slide that miter saw fence into those tracks, lock it into place. Here I'm showing I bought the flip down stop from Rockler that fits on this extruded aluminum perfectly. And then I grabbed a tape measure off of Amazon, and these came from Craig, and they actually worked really, really well. They're really nice. It's a thin steel sheet and it's got adhesive on it already, and you can stick it onto that fence. It's been working great. Now I wanted to make my router table a little more professional, but also just safer. You don't want to be reaching underneath every time to turn the router on and off. So you can buy these switches that you're going to find on most pieces of equipment. You can buy them separate and they just plug into the tool, and then they've got another plug that runs into the outlet. So you can use that to control the on and off of your tool. It's also a good idea to put these within reach of your knee. That way, if you're ever in a situation where you need to hold on to the workpiece and something's gone wrong and you can't really afford to let go and hit the off button, you can just throw your knee into it and that big old stop button is going to hit the off. Once again, using pocket holes for that. Here you can see I've got my miter saw track in place, but then I've also still got the room that I can bring out the router fence, insert it. I can grab the dust collection for it that I've now routed up through the table, and it just slides right on. Open up the gate. Turn on dust collection. And the dust is being sucked down into the table as well as up and out of the fence. Really happy with how that turned out. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this video. Thank you guys for watching. As you can see, I still haven't finished the drawer faces for all of these drawer boxes. I'm pretty bad at procrastinating, and if some projects seem like they're more fun than others, I'll skip the projects that aren't very fun. So right now the drawers work, even without faces. But I need to make them to actually finish the project. It's always the last 5% that I have the hardest time with. But tune in for the next video. That's where I'll probably finish that. If not, I'm also going to document this outfeed table that I have in front of me right now. that was sort of the last thing I needed to wrap up the shop build was this outfeed table. So Ashley and I just finished making that, and once I get that video put together, you'll see it posted on my page as well. Thanks for watching.